Welcome to US Secret Agenda YouTube channel. The flames of the conflict between Russia and the USA and NATO, which started with Ukraine in the east of Europe, spread very quickly to the Baltic Sea. Russia and the USA are currently at war in all the seas of the world. While Russian warships appear on the US coasts, on the other hand, they are harassing the US and UK navies in the Mediterranean. In addition, there are serious conflicts between the USA, Japan and Russia in the Kuril Islands in the Sea of Japan. After the negative outcome of the Geneva talks, NATO's pressure on Russia in recent days has increased. Many NATO countries also began to put pressure on Russia. While England and France threaten Russia with their warships and warplanes in the Black Sea, moves are also coming from different European countries. Russia's crises with many Baltic Sea countries have escalated after the Ukraine issue. Against these harsh moves from NATO and the USA, Russia is probably planning to respond with more. This is seen as the result of Vladimir Putin's relentless stubbornness. On the one hand, Russia is deploying over 100,000 troops, hundreds of advanced air defense systems and electronic warfare systems to the Ukrainian border, while also landing warships and submarines equipped with nuclear and Zircon missiles into the Black Sea via Crimea. With this plan, Putin wants to completely neutralize the United States in the Black Sea. However, the most critical region after the Black Sea is the Baltic Sea, and now Russia, the Baltic countries and NATO are playing on serious moves. The other day, the U.S. Navy's nuclear submarine entered the Baltic Sea and the Russian Navy blocked the U.S. Navy with 3 warships off the coast of Denmark. Now the Baltic countries such as Denmark, Sweden, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia are on the highest alert level against Russia. While the conflict between Russia, the USA and NATO, which started with Ukraine in the east of Europe, continued, a very serious attack came from Denmark. Denmark, a founding member of NATO, openly threatened to attack Russia. With this move, another active rival has emerged against Russia. Today, the Danish Ministry of Defense is sending 4 F-16 fighter jets and 2 warships from the Danish Navy in attack position to the Russian border. At the same time, besides the Baltic countries, the Black Sea countries are also taking a front against Russia. The U.S. Navy's USS Harry Truman carrier strike group is advancing from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea with the UK Royal Navy. But here, too, Russian spy submarines have haunted the US and UK navies. As the US and Russia talks stalled in Geneva, expectations of peaceful outcomes faded. Since there is no positive result, the two countries have been lashing out at each other lately. As we just mentioned, Russia and the USA are taking drastic measures with their armies both on land and at sea. Russian President Putin, on the other hand, will make his real hard moves after his meeting with President Biden, but he attaches great importance to Ukraine in line with the Soviet plan in his mind. It has been announced that it is trying to find a solution in response to NATO's harsh moves. Putin, who will try to underline his harsh statements, is very likely to order a much more unexpected and harsh operation these days. Let us now examine the striking details of the NATO-Russia conflict. The Danish Ministry of Defense announced on Monday that it will send the Iver Huitfeldt-class frigate Peter Willemoes and 4 F-16 fighter jets to NATO's standing naval force and to sovereignty enforcement in the Baltics, the online portal Naval News reports. According to the ministry's statement, the Danish government has decided this after consultation with the Foreign Policy Board. The Danish contribution will be under NATO's command, but will focus on the Baltics. The Royal Danish Navy frigate HDMS Peter Willemoes will be ready for deployment from mid-January and the 4 F-16 fighters by the end of the month. Russia's military buildup at Ukraine's borders and harsh tone towards NATO prompted NATO headquarters in December to ask member states for forces to ensure that the alliance has the necessary capabilities at its disposal. The contribution with the frigate Peter Willemoes is for NATO's standing naval forces, where in addition to the already registered contribution of 3 months, Denmark offers a frigate for another 3.5 months. We offer a strong and sought-after contribution to NATO by sending a frigate with 160 soldiers and 4 F-16 fighter jets and 70 men. That an almost unified Folketing, Danish parliament, is behind this is an important and clear signal, Danish Defence Minister Trine Bramsen said. The Iver Huitfeldt class is a class of 138-meter-long anti-air warfare frigates, built by Odense Stahlskibsværft for the Royal Danish Navy. 3 have been built and all of them were commissioned in 2011. The fighter jets will be based at Lithuania's Šiauliai Air Base, along with 8 other Danish planes that are already stationed there as part of the NATO Air Patrolling Unit. According to Kristina Miskauiak-Bekvard, Danish ambassador to Estonia, the country's offer to strengthen defense capabilities in the Baltics was welcomed by NATO. There is very strong support in the Danish parliament for all efforts in the Baltic Sea, Air quoted Miskauiak-Bekvard as saying. Many times we have seen unity on this topic in Denmark, and this is, of course, because we are talking about our own security interests too. We are talking about our own neighborhood, she added. In her words, the step aims to demonstrate NATO's unity and counter Russia's aggressive actions near the Ukrainian border. We are currently seeing aggressive and threatening behavior from the Russian side and, indeed, actually since the annexation of Crimea in 2014, so we are maintaining our defense. We are only responding, Miskauiak-Bekvard said. Moscow insists on guarantees to halt NATO's eastward expansion and even roll back the military alliance's deployments in Eastern Europe, while Washington firmly rejects the demands as a non-starter. Russian President Vladimir Putin has described NATO expansion to Ukraine and other former Soviet states as a red line for Moscow, demanding binding guarantees from the West that they wouldn't become members of the alliance. Moscow has sought to wrest a string of concessions from the US and its Western allies, and has massed an estimated 100,000 troops near Ukraine in steps that have raised concerns about a possible military intervention there. The situation now is so dangerous, and so, I would say, precarious that we cannot afford any further delays in resolution of this very fundamental question, Ryabkov said at a separate news conference at the Russian mission. As President Putin said, on many occasions, we cannot backpedal. We cannot go backwards. There is no further space for us to do so. Ryabkov rattled off Russian concerns and demands issued last month on subjects like NATO expansion and wanting Western commitments not to deploy offensive weapons near Russian borders. The American side has treated the Russian proposals seriously and deeply studied them, he said, adding that he characterized Moscow's demand for legally binding guarantees that NATO would not move eastward as an absolute imperative for us. Ryabkov emphasized that it would be hard to work on other issues if the US stonewalled on Russia's key demands. If now NATO proceeds towards deployment of capabilities that are being developed very rapidly in the US, and will possibly be introduced somewhere in Europe, it would require a military response on the Russian part. That is a decision to counter this threat through means at our discretion, said Ryabkov, speaking in English. That will inevitably, unavoidably damage security of the US and its European allies. He did not elaborate. The US has played down hopes of significant progress and said some Russian demands, like a possible halt to NATO expansion, go against countries' sovereign rights to set up their own security arrangements and are non-negotiable. But US officials have expressed openness to other ideas, like curtailing possible future deployments of offensive missiles in Ukraine and putting limits on American and NATO military exercises in Eastern Europe, if Russia is willing to back off on Ukraine. Blinken said Sunday he didn't expect any breakthroughs, with a more likely positive outcome being an agreement to de-escalate tensions in the short term and return to talks at an appropriate time. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg similarly played down expectations ahead of the talks. I don't think that we can expect that these meetings will solve all the issues, he told reporters in Brussels after talks with Olga Stefanishyna, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. What we are hoping for is that we can agree on a way forward, that we can agree on a series of meetings, that we can agree on a process. During a visit to Rome, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said dialogue offered the only way out of the crisis. At the same time, it's equally clear that a renewed breach of Ukrainian sovereignty by Russia would have grave consequences, she said. However, Moscow's aggression has stirred old fears in its neighbors. It has been a turbulent few months in the Baltics. If you know history, it shouldn't be surprising that Baltic publics are worried about Russia and the tumult in the post-Soviet region. The Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, were occupied by first the Russian Empire and then, after a brief period of independence between the world wars, the Soviet Union. Revanchists in Moscow have clung on to the idea that they have a right to the Baltic states, even after more than 30 years of independence. The migrant crisis sparked by the Russian-backed dictator Alexander Lukashenko on the Belarusian borders, especially with Poland but with Lithuania and Latvia, 2. The potential of escalation of conflict in Ukraine, and even the chaos and brutal crackdown happening in Kazakhstan right now serve as a grim reminder that business as usual just isn't a valid survival strategy for the Baltic states at this point. Focusing on collective security in the region, taking threats seriously, and taking care of military budgets are necessities. On a state level, this concern is clearly noticeable. In its annual report, the Latvian State Security Service concluded that the number one security threat for Latvia in 2021 was the Russian secret services, with the corresponding Chinese and Belarusian agencies taking second and third place. At the same time, on deck. 2021, the defense ministers of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, Kalle Laanet, Artis Pabriks, and Arvydas Anusauskas, respectively, issued a joint statement after a meeting in Kaunas, Lithuania. There, they called for a joint approach to counter Russian and Belarusian attempts to destabilize European security. The Baltic ministers were also critical about the Russian attempts to establish spheres of influence in Europe and deny sovereign countries' right to determine their own future, especially referencing the shared history of the Baltics and how it turned out last time that something like this was happening. The statement noted that the Baltic states are greatly concerned about Russia's concentration of military forces on the borders of Ukraine. Most importantly, they concluded their statement by saying that the Baltics are standing with Ukraine. Given the urgency to strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities, the ministers expressed readiness to provide immediate support for Ukraine, including all available non-military and military instruments of power, including lethal weapons. Statements like this are nothing new. The Baltic states have been worried about their relationships with their eastern neighbor, and former occupier, since forever. The only states on Russia's border with which it has warm relationships are those that have large issues with corruption and democracy themselves.